Welcome to my channel, Crimson Inquiry.
The Whispering House on Welbourne Street was upon a chill and mist-heavy evening in the late autumn of 1889 that I first heard of the affair which was to come to be known among our circle as the Whisper beneath the Floorboards. London, draped in its usual shroud of fog and coal smoke, seemed to hold its breath, as though the city itself sensed some approaching unease. Holmes had been in one of his restless moods for several days, pacing, playing abrupt chords upon his violin, and muttering darkly about the monotony of unchallenged intellect. It was close upon 9 o'clock when Mrs. Hudson entered our sitting-room at Baker Street, bearing a note upon a silver tray. "A messenger, sir," she announced, and he seemed in quite a state, if I may say so. Holmes took the note, glanced at the sealer, crimson wax pressed with a lion rampant, gave a slight whistle. "Ah, Lord Ferncliff," said he. "Watson, we are about to be relieved of our ennui. The nobleman writes rarely, and only when his affairs have gone quite beyond the reach of ordinary discretion." He broke the seal and read aloud, "My dear Mr. Holmes, I beg your immediate assistance. An unaccountable series of sounds has plagued my townhouse in Welbourne Street. Low whisperings and rustling movements beneath the drawing-room floorboards, most audible after midnight. My servants are in terror. My wife has taken ill from fright. The police, having inspected the premises, declare it a matter for superstition rather than science. I am desperate for your counsel. Yours in urgency, Lord Arthur Ferncliff." Holmes folded the letter neatly and rose. A whispering from beneath the floor, dismissed by Scotland Yard as superstition. "Excellent, Watson. The cabman shall find us ready in 10 minutes. Bring your revolver. One should never assume that an invisible cause is an innocent one." Within the hour we were rolling through the damp and gaslit streets of London. The fog pressed close to the windows, and the clip-clop of the horses' hooves echoed faintly, as if muffled by unseen walls. Holmes sat in silence, his eyes half closed, his long fingers drumming upon his knee. "Holmes," I ventured, "surely this business of whispering beneath a floor could have any number of simple explanations. Drafts, loose boards—" "Ah, my dear fellow," he interrupted softly, "it is precisely the simplicity of such explanations that invites deception. The human mind, Watson, prefers the ordinary to the improbable, and therein lies the trap. I do not yet know whether we face natural mischief or criminal artifice, but I am curious as to why a peer of the realm should appeal to me for aid, when a carpenter or inspector might have sufficed." We soon drew up before Ferncliff House, a tall, dignified structure of grey stone, half lost in fog and shadow. A single lamp burned within, throwing a wavering glow across the entrance. The butler, pale and trembling, ushered us in with evident relief. "His lordship awaits you in the drawing-room, sir," he whispered. "But if I may be so bold, none of us stay below stairs after midnight. There are sounds, sir, voices that do not belong to the living." Holmes' grey eyes flashed. "Voices, you say? Very good, Watson. I fancy this will prove more than a simple case of vermin." As we stepped into the richly appointed drawing-room, Lord Ferncliff rose to greet us. He was a tall, anxious-looking gentleman of perhaps 40, his face drawn with sleeplessness. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, thank heaven you've come. If you remain until midnight, you shall hear it for yourself." A whispering, faint yet unmistakable, as though someone, he shuddered, as though someone was speaking through the floor. Holmes moved toward the hearth, where an ornate Persian rug covered the center of the room. Kneeling, he lifted a corner, tapped the boards beneath, and pressed his ear to the floor. For a moment he was still, then he straightened with a curious expression. "Watson," said he quietly, "you are not wrong to think of the ordinary, but this, I fear, is something quite extraordinary indeed. There is air moving beneath these boards where no air should flow, a hollow space, perhaps, or a hidden chamber." The clock upon the mantel struck 11. The fog outside thickened. Somewhere beneath our feet, faint as a sigh, came a sound like the brushing of silk against wood. A whisper, rising from the dark. Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Now, Watson," he murmured, "let us see who or what has chosen to speak from beneath the floor." End of section I. The Hook. Next section. The case introduced the drawing-room mystery of Lord Ferncliff, where Holmes begins his first deductions, and the investigation formally commences. Lord Ferncliff's trembling hand guided us to a pair of armchairs near the hearth, though his eyes drifted again and again toward the rug that covered the suspected spot. The fire snapped sharply, but the warmth in the room seemed only to deepen the tension. Holmes stood in silence for a moment, his lean figure outlined against the faint light. His gaze travelled to the cornices, the mantelpiece. The arrangement of furniture, every inch of the room was studied with that sharp, restless energy which I had come to recognize as the prelude to one of his most complete absorptions. "You say these whisperings occur each night at roughly the same hour?" he asked. "Almost precisely, Mr. Holmes. Between midnight and past. Sometimes they cease suddenly, sometimes they rise to a faint murmuring, as though two persons were conversing." "Persons," Holmes repeated thoughtfully. "You are certain the sound is not that of wind through a vent, or of vermin beneath the boards?" Lord Ferncliff shook his head. "The constable and even a carpenter examined it. Sir, there is no opening beneath that floor, save for a few inches of joist space. It was laid solid upon the foundation." Holmes stooped once more and tapped the boards lightly with the handle of his cane. Each blow produced a dull, compact resonance until he reached the center of the room, where the sound changed subtly a note of hollowness. His eyes gleamed. "So," he murmured, "not so solid after all." At that moment, the butler entered with a decanter and glasses, his hands trembling so violently that the contents nearly spilled. Holmes motioned for him to set the tray down. "You, sir, your name?" "Barker, Mr. Holmes." "You have served his lordship long?" 12 years, sir." "And during that time, has the house undergone any alterations to your knowledge?" The man hesitated. "Only minor repairs, sir. Though if the workmen did pull up some of the flooring in this very room about 5 years ago. When a section of the foundation was damp, they replaced it all within a day." "Indeed," Holmes said softly. "Who supervised that work?" "Mr. Fenley, the estate manager. But he left Lord Ferncliff's employ not long after. He passed away last year, poor soul." Holmes' fingers came together in that familiar steepled pose. Curious. Workmen, hidden flooring, and now a phantom whisper. "Tell me, Barker, does any member of the household remain below stairs after 11? "No, sir. None of us will do it now. The footman swears he heard someone calling his name from under the floor 3 nights ago. He fled and gave notice the next morning." Holmes exchanged a brief look with mere flicker of triumph and amusement. "Watson," he said quietly, "we are dealing with an agency far more human than spectral. I will wager my violin upon it." We remained until midnight. The household retired early, leaving only the 3 of us by the fading fire. The silence that descended upon the drawing-room was of that peculiar quality which magnifies every crick and sigh of the old house. The hands of the clock crawled toward 12. Holmes sat perfectly still in a straight-backed chair, his eyes half closed, one hand resting lightly upon the floorboards. Then it came a faint, almost musical whisper, like breath drawn across the rim of a glass. It rose and fell, an unintelligible murmur, yet unmistakably human. I felt my blood chill. Lord Ferncliff gripped the arms of his chair. His face had gone the color of parchment. Holmes opened his eyes, calm and keen. "There it is. Note, Watson, the direction from the northeast corner, not directly beneath us. And listen, there are 2 tones, not 1. The whisper persisted for several seconds, a soft succession of sounds that might have been words. Then it ceased as suddenly as it had begun. Holmes rose without haste, struck a match, and knelt again to examine the boards near the corner he had indicated. The faint sulphur glow traced the pattern of the grain. "Watson, do you perceive this?" he murmured. "The dust along this board is less than along the rest. Someone has handled or moved it within recent weeks. And here this minute indentation beside the skirting marks of a tool, perhaps a chisel." Ferncliff looked bewildered. "But who could have done such a thing? None of my staff would dare meddle in here after dark." "Then the mischief is not of their doing," Holmes replied. "It is either someone who knows this house intimately, or someone who wishes you to believe it haunted." He requested a lantern, which Barker fetched reluctantly from the hall. Holmes examined the perimeter of the rug, then traced with his finger a faint line of discoloration in the varnish, a nearly invisible outline forming a rough rectangle. He tapped again, and this time the hollow resonance came clearer. "Watson," he said with quiet satisfaction, "a concealed hatch, cleverly joined to the flooring. The carpenter who did this work was no amateur. Lord Ferncliff, may I have your permission to open it?" "By all means, Mr. Holmes, though I dread what we may find." With a swift, economical motion, Holmes produced from his pocket a narrow blade, inserted it into the seam, and pried gently. The board lifted with surprising ease. Beneath lay darkness, a cavity, perhaps 3 feet deep. Holmes lowered the lantern into the opening, and its glow revealed a narrow brick-lined space running the width of the room. At first, nothing moved. Then the light caught upon something pale, a length of paper fluttering in a draught. Holmes reached down and drew it forth. It was an envelope, sealed but stained at one edge. Upon it, written in a hurried scrawl, were the words, "For my son, should I not return." Holmes regarded it for a long moment before slipping it carefully into his pocket. "We shall not open this yet," he said. "Its message will wait until daylight. But I can assure you, Lord Ferncliff, the whispers are not born of any supernatural cause." He replaced the board with its exact precision, stood, and brushed the dust from his hands. "There is ventilation in the space below, perhaps connecting to another room. A whisper through such a channel might travel with startling clarity. We must learn where it leads." He turned toward the butler. "Barker, have you noticed any locked or unused chambers adjoining this one? Cellars, servants' corridors, anything beneath the drawing room?" Barker hesitated, thinking hard. "There is the wine cellar below, sir, and a disused storage room at the far end of the basement. It hasn't been opened in years." "Precisely. That is where we shall begin tomorrow morning," Holmes said. "For tonight, Watson, I suggest we remain as guests. I should like another conversation with our unseen whisperer, should he grow talkative again." Ferncliff, clearly relieved, yet uneasy, ordered rooms prepared for us upstairs. As we climbed the staircase, Holmes' manner grew abstracted. He seemed absorbed in thought. At the landing, I could not refrain from asking what he made of it all. "My dear Watson," he said, pausing with that faint, knowing smile, "when a man hides words beneath his own floor and fills his house with whispers, it is rarely the ghost that troubles him, it is his conscience." He left me staring after him as he disappeared into his room, the echo of his words mingling with the low moan of the wind that crept through the old house, like a whisper seeking a listener in the dark. I slept but little that night. The house seemed alive with sounds, the distant sigh of old timbers, the rhythmic ticking of a clock somewhere below, and once, a faint rustle, as though a cautious foot had crossed the corridor outside my room. Toward dawn, I rose and found Holmes already dressed, seated at the window, the first grey light outlining his sharp features. "You heard it too, Watson," he said quietly, without turning. "Our whisperer has a fondness for nocturnal wanderings. He passed this door at 2:47 precisely." I stared. "You saw him?" "Not saw, heard, and smelt," Holmes replied. "A faint odor of lamp oil, unrefined, and the scrape of boots that have trodden damp soil. Not the butler's step, nor Ferncliff's. We shall meet our visitor soon enough." By the time breakfast was laid, Lord Ferncliff looked haggard and ill at ease. He confessed he had not slept a wink, for the whispers had returned faintly in the small hours, though this time, he swore, they had come from behind the very walls of his chamber. Holmes listened with half-closed eyes. "Indeed, the phenomenon migrates. Then, that suggests a network of passages or hollow conduits within the structure. If the same resonance can travel between floors, our next task is to trace its course." He insisted we descend immediately to the cellar. Barker, pale and reluctant, led the way with a keyring that jingled faintly in his shaking hands. The stone steps curved downward into a chill air heavy with the smell of dust and damp wood. The lantern's glow fell upon rows of wine racks, their bottles long disused, and a narrow corridor that vanished into darkness. "This way," Sir Barker whispered, pointing to a rotted door at the far end. "That's the old storage room. None of us have been in there for years." Holmes examined the door. The hinges were rusted but not immovable. He ran a finger along the frame, noting a patch of disturbed dust. "Someone has," he said simply. With a deft push, the door creaked open. The room beyond was small, low-ceilinged, and lined with forgotten crates and broken furniture. Yet what caught our eyes first was a patch of disturbed earth in the corner recently turned, its texture loose and moist. Beside it lay a shovel. Ferncliff gasped. "Good heavens! What does this mean?" Holmes dropped to one knee and sifted the soil through his fingers. "Dug within the last 24 hours, a single pair of boots, heavy and look, here a faint thread caught upon the splintered wood of this crate, silk pale blue. You recognize it?" "My lord." Ferncliff's lips parted in astonishment. That is from my late wife's dressing gown. But how in heaven's name?" Holmes' expression remained unreadable. "It appears the past has begun to stir. Watson, hold the lantern higher." As the light shifted, something gleamed faintly in the disturbed earth. Holmes brushed the soil aside, and drew out a small, corroded locket. He prized it open. Inside lay a miniature portrait, faded, but still distinct, of a young woman, her features fine and melancholy. "Lady Ferncliff," Holmes said softly. "Painted, I should imagine, not long before her disappearance." Ferncliff swayed, his hands trembling. "Disappearance? She died abroad, in Italy. I was sent word that she succumbed to fever." "Yes," Holmes finished, "but perhaps the fever was of another sort entirely. Tell me, did you ever receive her remains?" Ferncliff stared at him as though struck. "No, the body was never returned. Her physician claimed it was impossible." Holmes nodded slowly. "Indeed, convenient impossibilities are my bread and butter, my lord." He replaced the locket carefully in his pocket. This was hidden, not buried to decay, but preserved. Whoever interred it meant to return. The question is, why now? Barker shifted uneasily. "Beg pardon, sir," he murmured, "but if it's her ladyship's things, perhaps the one who dug here last night was, well, her ghost." Holmes straightened sharply. "Ghosts, Barker, do not wear boots made by Hobbes of Piccadilly." He turned the lantern downward again, pointing to a set of prints in the soft soil. "Note the size and tread identical to those of the gardener, Judd, whom I observed yesterday mending the hedges. We shall speak with him directly." We emerged from the cellar into pale daylight. Holmes was in high spirits. The scent of the chase had gripped him. He sent Barker to summon the gardener, and within minutes a heavy-set man appeared, cap in hand, his face a picture of sullen defiance. Holmes wasted no time. "Mr. Judd, you were in the old storage room last night." "I was not, sir," the man protested. "Never set foot there." Holmes' gaze sharpened. "Strange, then, that your boots bear the same clay that lies beneath that room and nowhere else on the estate." "Come, man, we both know you dug there. What were you searching for?" Judd's jaw worked. He glanced uneasily at Ferncliff. I was told to, sir." "By whom?" The man hesitated, beads of sweat forming upon his brow. "It was a letter, sir, slipped under my door 3 nights ago. Said I was to dig in that spot, and I'd find something worth my while. No name, just the words, for the truth she never told. I thought it was a jest." Holmes exchanged a swift glance with me. "A jest that left you trembling, I wager, and you found nothing but an old locket." "Yes, I, sir. I didn't take it, I swear. I heard someone upstairs just then, whispering. It frightened me half to death. I ran out, and never went back." Holmes' voice softened, though his eyes remained calculating. "That will do, Judd. You may go, but stay within reach. I shall have more to ask." When the man had gone, Ferncliff turned to Holmes in despair. "This is beyond comprehension. What truth could that note mean?" Holmes clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly. "Let us consider. A hidden locket bearing your wife's image, a message addressed to my son, should I not return, and whispers that seemed to move through the house as though the walls themselves carried memory. Suppose, my lord, that what vanished years ago was not merely your wife, but a secret she guarded. You imply that she may never have left England at all." Holmes finished quietly. "And that someone, even now, wishes you to learn what she took with her or what you lost when she disappeared." At that moment, a cry rang from the upper floor, a woman's scream, sharp and terrified. Holmes was gone before I could move. Racing up the stairs 3 at a time, I followed close behind. The sound had come from a guest room at the far end of the corridor. Barker stood there, white-faced, pointing within. The maid, Ellen, knelt beside the bed, clutching her apron. Her eyes were wide, staring toward the wall. There, scrawled across the faded wallpaper in uneven letters, were the words, "He knows. The truth is beneath." The letters glistened darkly, as though written in some wet substance, still drying. I felt my stomach turn. Holmes examined it closely. "Pigment," he said at last. "Not blood, lamp, soot and oil. Written within the last half hour. Someone is toying with us. Watson, someone who moves freely within this house, even as we stand guard." He turned to Ferncliff, who had entered behind us, his face ashen. "My lord, I must ask a difficult question. Did you and your late wife have a child?" Ferncliff stared at him, speechless for a moment. Then, in a broken whisper, "A son, born while we were abroad, but he died in infancy, or so I was told." Holmes' eyes blazed with sudden intensity. "Or so you were told. I believe, my dear Watson, that the hour has come to lift the last board from this house of whispers." He looked toward the concealed hatch beneath the drawing-room floor. For beneath those timbers lies not only the key to this riddle, but perhaps the one voice that has never ceased speaking. Holmes knelt beside the drawing-room floorboards, the dim light from the fireplace glinting off his eyes as he traced the seams between the planks with a thin blade. His movements were precise, almost reverent, as if he feared disturbing something ancient and fragile that slumbered beneath. I could hear Ferncliffe's unsteady breathing behind me, the air thick with dread and expectation. "Watson," Holmes murmured, "fetch the lantern. Whatever lies here has been concealed deliberately, not merely for years, but for decades." I brought the light closer, and Holmes pressed his fingers to the edges of the boards. "Note the pattern of nails," he said. "They are newer than the adjoining planks replaced, perhaps 20 years ago. And here see the faint scoring marks. Someone pried this open before." Lord Ferncliff staggered forward, his voice hoarse. "Holmes, what in heaven's name are you suggesting?" "That this is the heart of your house's secret, my lord," Holmes replied evenly. The whispers beneath the floorboards were not spectral, they were human. This cavity was used, perhaps still used, for concealment. The question is, of what? With a soft creak, the final nail lifted. Holmes eased back the panel, and a breath of cold, stale air exhaled from the dark void beneath. I felt the hairs rise on my neck. Holmes leaned down, lantern in hand. The yellow light revealed a narrow recess, perhaps 3 feet deep, lined with crumbling plaster and the remnants of a wooden compartment. Within lay a small chest iron bound, its lock rusted but intact. Holmes touched the metal lightly. "Unopened for years," he said, "and yet disturbed recently. How can you tell?" I asked. "The dust," he replied. "See how it lies unevenly. Someone brushed their sleeve against the edge, perhaps when last they crept here to listen or retrieve something." He drew a set of picks from his pocket, and within moments the lock gave a faint click. The lid rose with a reluctant sigh, and a waft of decay escaped into the room. Inside were several items, carefully arranged, a sheaf of letters tied with faded ribbon, a small silver key, and at the bottom a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age. Holmes examined the letters first. The handwriting was delicate, unmistakably feminine. "To my beloved Henry," he read aloud softly. "That, Watson, was Lady Ferncliffe's hand. The dates correspond with the period of her supposed exile in Italy." Ferncliffe's face drained of all colour. "She wrote to me after she had gone. It appears she never left at all," Holmes replied. He untied the ribbon, scanning the pages swiftly. "These are not love letters. They are confessions. Listen, I fear the truth may one day be discovered. If so, know that what I did for the child." Holmes paused. "The child, Watson, the son she was said to have lost." He unfolded the final parchment. It bore a birth record name, date, and a signature of the attending midwife. The name inscribed upon it froze us all. "Edward Ferncliff." Holmes' voice dropped to a whisper. "Not dead at all, it seems." Lord Ferncliff stumbled backward, one hand clutching the edge of a chair for support. "This cannot be. The child, my child, was buried abroad. I was shown the papers." Holmes laid a gentle hand upon his arm. "I do not doubt you were shown something, my lord, but perhaps not the truth. It appears Lady Ferncliff gave birth in this very house, in secrecy. Why she concealed it, and why she left, are the questions that remain." He turned toward the window, where faint daylight filtered through the curtains. "And the one person who might still hold the key to this riddle," he said slowly, "is the author of that mysterious note to the gardener, the one who wrote, 'For the truth she never told.'" Holmes replaced the documents and closed the chest. "Watson, there is a pattern forming here, one that fits too neatly to be chance. Someone within this household, someone with knowledge of the past, is playing a dangerous game. We must identify them before they act again." Ferncliff sank into an armchair, his expression hollow. "You think, my son lives." "I think, my lord," Holmes said gravely, "that your house harbours a ghost far more substantial than the whispering of air through walls." He rang for Barker. The butler entered, pale and hesitant, his eyes darting to the open floorboards. Holmes watched him closely. "Barker, how long have you served the Ferncliff family?" 32 years, sir," the man stammered. "Since before her ladyship's time." "And during those years," Holmes continued, "have you known of any peculiar servants dismissed unexpectedly, forbidden rooms, unexplained absences?" The butler hesitated, twisting his hands. "There was the nursemaid, sir, Miss Keene. She left suddenly right after Lady Ferncliffe's illness. The master forbade us to speak of her again." Ferncliffe's head lifted. Keen. Good heavens, I had forgotten her name entirely. She tended my wife during the last months before she departed. Holmes' eyes gleamed, and likely attended her during childbirth. Barker, find me her last known address. She may be the only living witness who knows what became of that child. The butler bowed and hurried from the room. Holmes turned to me, his expression tense but electric with focus. Watson, it all coheres now. The whispers, the letters, the false death, the secret beneath the floorboards, each a piece of a larger design. The motive, however, still eludes me. What truth did Lady Ferncliff fear to reveal, and who profits by its suppression? I was about to reply when a sharp knock sounded at the front door. Barker had not yet returned. Holmes motioned for silence and moved swiftly to the entryway, gesturing for me to follow. He opened the door a fraction. A young man stood on the step, perhaps in his late 20s, tall, lean, with eyes that carried both defiance and weariness. His clothes were worn but clean. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. I beg your pardon. I was told Lord Ferncliff resides here. I have travelled far to see him. Holmes studied him for a long moment. Your name? Edward, the stranger said quietly. Edward Ferncliff. The silence that followed was absolute. Ferncliff himself appeared in the doorway, staring as though he had seen a spectre. The young man bowed slightly. I do not come to harm you, sir, he said, only to learn why my mother died alone beneath this very house. Ferncliff gasped, a broken sound, and staggered back. Holmes' eyes flashed with fierce comprehension. Watson, he murmured, we have reached the heart of it. But take care, truth once unearthed can be as deadly as any weapon. The young man's gaze hardened. I know what lies below, he said, his voice low but steady. I heard her cries through the floor as a child. You called it the whisper beneath the boards. It was not the wind, gentlemen. It was her. Holmes' face turned ashen, yet his composure did not break. Then, Mr. Ferncliff, he said softly, I fear this house has far more to say before it falls silent again. Holmes' gaze never wavered from Edward Ferncliff, taking in every subtle twitch, every tremor of the hand, as if reading the young man's very thoughts from the nuances of his posture. The room was thick with tension, and even Lord Ferncliff seemed rooted to the spot, pale and uncertain, as if the very air had become dense with secrets long suppressed. You have heard her, Holmes said quietly, his voice steady and deliberate, and yet you came not to reveal, but to understand. A rare disposition, Mr. Ferncliff, for one who has been the instrument of concealment for so long. Edward's eyes flickered, a mixture of fear and defiance. I did not conceal anything, sir. I only lived as she commanded, hidden from the world. All my life, I was taught to wait, to observe, to remain unseen. My mother feared for me, and for all who knew the truth. Holmes leaned forward slightly. And now, you wish to claim what has been yours by right, the truth. Watson, note the keen observation here. This young man is intelligent, patient, and disciplined, but inexperienced in guile. He presents a danger only insofar as he might panic or act rashly when confronted with the wrong person. Lord Ferncliff, struggling to regain some composure, stepped closer. Edward, my son, how is this possible? How have you survived all these years without word, without a trace? Edward swallowed hard. My mother arranged it. She entrusted me to the care of her nurse, Miss Keene. She ensured I would be kept safe, and that the house would speak to me through the whispers when the time was right. Only then would I know the whole story. Holmes' eyes narrowed. A remarkable precaution. And the notes, the messages to the gardener, the concealed locket, these were your mother's posthumous instruments to guide you, or to test your father's resolve. Edward hesitated. Both. Perhaps she knew that my father might never uncover the truth unless it was presented in fragments. That is why the letters, the hidden chest, and the whispers existed. She trusted that the cleverest man in London, Mr. Holmes, would eventually piece them together. Holmes allowed himself a brief smile, but it was one of satisfaction, not triumph. Indeed, Mr. Ferncliff, it appears the whispers beneath the floorboards were a series of deliberate clues, a trail intended for the one who could reason correctly. Watson, we are not merely investigating a haunting, we are decoding a series of intellectual signposts left by a woman of remarkable foresight. Edward looked around the drawing room, his gaze sweeping the old furniture, the rug under which the hidden hatch still lay, and finally settling on the fireplace where Holmes had first demonstrated his keen ear. I grew up with these whispers as my lullaby, he said softly. I knew they were my mother's voice, though I could not understand the meaning until now. Ferncliff took a trembling step forward. And you, my son, have come home at last. I feared we would never meet, that I had lost you forever. Why did she keep this secret so long? Holmes interjected, calm but incisive. Because, my lord, secrecy was necessary to ensure safety. The presence of an illegitimate or presumed dead child could have invited peril, both to the family and to the child. Only someone of extraordinary patience, intelligence, and moral grounding qualities clearly evident in Mr. Edward Ferncliff could be trusted with the knowledge of the house's hidden truths. Edward's lips quivered, his emotions raw. I have questions. So many. Where was Miss Keene? Why were the messages so cryptic? What danger still lurks in this house? Holmes considered him carefully. The nursemaid ensured you would survive unnoticed, keeping the house in a state of readiness for your eventual discovery. As for the cryptic messages, consider them a form of intellectual safeguard. Each step required reasoning, observation, and courage to interpret. They were not mere warnings, they were instructions, tests for both you and your father. Ferncliff's hands shook. But the whispers, the voice beneath the floorboards, what of that? Is it still active? Holmes inclined his head. Yes, in a sense. The hollow passages and the acoustics of the house preserved the resonance, making it possible for a perceptive listener to discern tones, intonations, and patterns. The whispers themselves were not alive. They were an artifact of the house's construction and your mother's careful planning, yet they carried the weight of her intent and her presence, guiding both you and your father toward understanding. Edward's eyes brightened with comprehension. So it was not a ghost. It was a deliberate communication, designed for someone who could read it as I have. Exactly, Holmes said, standing upright. And the urgency of your arrival ensured that the puzzle, once begun, could reach its logical conclusion. Every element, the letters, the locket, the hatch beneath the floorboards, was part of a sequence intended to bring this family back together, safely and without deception from others who might misuse the knowledge. I observed whose features now showed relief, mixed with lingering disbelief. Holmes, he said slowly, this has been beyond any imagination I possessed. I had thought my life bereft of surprises. Now I find that it has been orchestrated by my own wife, even from her absence. And yet, Edward stands before me, my son, my heir. Holmes nodded. Indeed, my lord, and that, in itself, completes a crucial aspect of the case. There was no malevolence here, only concealment for protection. Yet we must be cautious. The existence of hidden passages, messages, and instructions means that others could exploit them if they discover them. The house, while benign in its past intent, could still harbor danger if the wrong eyes observe its secrets. Edward stepped closer to his father, a mixture of respect and newfound authority in his posture. Father, I have questions. Yes, but first, I wish to understand the conditions under which I lived, and the choices my mother made, how she planned for me to emerge safely, and how I might restore the balance she sought. Holmes' gaze softened as he regarded both men. It will take time, patience, and careful consideration. But rest assured, the most challenging elements of this case, the misdirection, the secrecy, the whispers, have served their purpose. The child who was thought lost has been found, and the father who thought him dead may now begin to reconcile with truth. Ferncliff, his voice trembling with emotion, asked, Holmes, you have unraveled what none else could. How did you know where to begin? Holmes allowed a rare smile. Observation, my dear lord, and an understanding of human foresight. Lady Ferncliff was clever. Her arrangements were meticulous, designed to be deciphered only by a mind capable of reasoning through layers of intentional concealment. All that remained was to follow the sequence of signs she left, and to anticipate human behavior in every form: fear, obedience, curiosity, and loyalty. Edward's eyes were bright with comprehension and awe. So the whispers beneath the floorboards were never meant to frighten. They were a guide, a method of communication through time and space within the walls themselves. Holmes inclined his head. Precisely. And now, with all elements of the plan converging, we may proceed to uncover the final truths, the motives behind each action, the hidden correspondence, and the individuals who remained silent for the safety of all. This, Watson, is where intellect meets consequence and where deduction must prevail over sentiment, even in matters of family. Ferncliff's voice wavered. And what of those who might have sought to exploit these secrets while I was unaware? Holmes turned toward him, eyes sharp. We must be vigilant. The architecture of secrecy is a double-edged sword. Yet, with knowledge, foresight, and careful handling, the truth may be safeguarded. And, my lord, now that Edward has come of age, and is aware of the circumstances, the house itself may rest once more, free from the need to whisper. Edward nodded solemnly. Then we shall begin, father, by learning everything my mother intended for us to understand. The past, at last, may guide the future. Holmes allowed himself a moment's satisfaction, his keen mind already piecing together the next steps, the interviews, the verification of the letters, the mapping of the passages, and the careful questioning of those who remained silent. The mystery was far from over. Yet for the first time, a clear path had emerged. The whispers beneath the floorboards had spoken, and now, at last, we had listened. The morning sun filtered weakly through the tall windows of Ferncliff House, its pale light revealing dust motes dancing in the still air. Holmes had insisted upon beginning at once, for he believed that time, in a house such as this, was of the essence. Edward, newly acquainted with the truth of his own life, accompanied us silently, his eyes fixed upon every object, as though seeking hints of his mother's intentions hidden within the ordinary furnishings. Lord Ferncliff followed, a mixture of awe and lingering trepidation in his expression. Still grappling with the enormity of what had been revealed overnight, Holmes led us first to the cellar once more, where the hidden hatch still lay partially obscured beneath the rug in the drawing-room above. "It is imperative," he said, "that we map the subterranean connections before we disturb any evidence unnecessarily. The past is delicate, but it can instruct us if we proceed with care." With lanterns in hand, we descended the curved stone stairs into the chill, musty air. Holmes moved with the silent assurance of one who has rehearsed every movement in advance. He knelt beside the chest we had discovered the previous evening, extracting the letters and the parchment once more, his fingers tracing the edges of each object with almost reverential attention. "Observe, Watson, how the folds and creases indicate repeated handling. Someone has referred to these documents several times since their concealment, likely testing their own understanding of what they contain." Edward leaned forward, peering over Holmes' shoulder. "They were meant for me, weren't they? My mother wanted me to find them, to know the truth." "Indeed," Holmes replied, his voice quiet but firm. "The sequence of concealment, retrieval, and the whispers above were orchestrated with precision. Your mother was determined that you should emerge with a full understanding of your heritage, and yet only after proving your patience, attention, and capacity for reasoning." Ferncliff's voice trembled as he asked, "And the nursemaid, Miss Kenshi, still lives? Can she confirm the circumstances of my wife's departure?" Holmes' sharp gaze met mine. "She does, I believe, though her whereabouts may be difficult to ascertain. Barker, you indicated that she left without explanation." The butler, summoned again, nodded. "Yes, sir. She took leave after Lady Ferncliff fell ill, and the master forbade any inquiries. None of us have heard from her since, until recently some letters arrived, but they were intercepted and never delivered to me. I cannot say why." Holmes' eyes glinted. "A controlled communication, then, designed to preserve secrecy. We must track her down, but prudence is required. Any sudden revelation might jeopardize both Edward and the household." He motioned toward the far corner of the cellar, where the narrow brick-lined corridor led to the disused storage room. "Watson, note the acoustics here." The whispers, which Edward heard as a child, were amplified through these passages. A single voice, or even the echo of footsteps, could produce the sensation of multiple presences. Whoever guided him relied on this effect to instill caution, vigilance, and awareness. Edward bent down, placing his hand upon the brick walls, his fingers tracing the rough mortar. "I remember, years ago, I would hear the faintest sounds and tremble, knowing my mother had set them deliberately. I never understood how, or why, until now." Holmes nodded. "Exactly. And now, the final piece awaits, the verification of the letters and the locket, alongside confirmation from any living witnesses. Only then will the narrative be complete. But first, we must consider another critical factor. Who else knows of these passages and might exploit them?" Ferncliff's eyes widened. "Other than the servants, or those who discovered the cellar before? Surely none." Holmes' expression hardened. "Not necessarily. Consider the gardener, Judd. He has already been involved in the excavation, albeit unknowingly, guided by a cryptic note. Others may have been employed similarly, or observed suspicious patterns without fully comprehending their significance. We must proceed carefully. I intend to retrace the entire path of the whispers, noting every junction, hollow, and vent. He led us methodically through the cellar, measuring, tapping, and examining. The walls, cold and damp, seemed almost to breathe as Holmes traced the line of hidden channels. Edward's comprehension grew with each step. So these were not merely random structures, he said. They were designed to communicate deliberately, using acoustics, layout, and timing. My mother thought of everything. Holmes' lips pressed together in satisfaction. Indeed, it is rare, Watson, to find such foresight in a single individual. The combination of intellect, caution, and maternal concern has preserved a child and concealed the truth for decades. And yet, the final revelation must still come. For all the precautions, we have yet to ascertain the complete identity of those who acted on her behalf, and those who might seek to manipulate the situation for their own ends. Edward's gaze hardened. I must know. If anyone is exploiting this, I will confront them. I have waited my entire life for clarity. Holmes studied him, his eyes keen and discerning. Patience, my young friend. Knowledge without context can be dangerous. Our task is to gather evidence, confirm facts, and expose truth gradually. Only then may action be taken safely. We spent hours tracing the passages, noting subtle variations in the walls, indentations where objects had been hidden, and minor distortions in the floorboards above. Holmes recorded each observation meticulously, mapping the acoustic pathways that had transmitted whispers and messages. A sophisticated design, indeed, he murmured, and the logic is impeccably calculated to teach caution, observation, and reasoning, rather than to terrify. Your mother, Edward, was a master of deliberate instruction. Edward's eyes glimmered. I understand now. I am not angry at the secrecy. I am grateful. She preserved me, guided me, and ensured I would emerge ready to act wisely. Holmes turned his gaze to me. Watson, the final phase approaches. Once Miss Keene is located, her testimony will allow us to verify every step, from the concealment of the child to the orchestration of the letters and whispers. Only then will the full truth stand unassailable. But we must move carefully, for human nature being what it is, secrecy often breeds jealousy, suspicion, and the occasional attempt at mischief. Ferncliff, pale but resolute, nodded. I will trust you, Holmes. Find the nursemaid, reveal all that she knows, and restore the order my wife intended. Edward has returned, and at last the family may know peace. Holmes smiled faintly, a rare expression of satisfaction. Indeed, my lord, yet I warn you, the path ahead, while illuminated by understanding, may also contain unforeseen obstacles. The past, even when unveiled, retains the power to astonish, confound, and challenge the present. That is the nature of truth in human affairs. As we emerged from the cellar and ascended to the drawing room once more, the whispers that had haunted Edward's childhood now seemed almost benign, vestiges of a careful orchestration whose purpose had been fulfilled. Holmes' mind, however, remained alert, plotting the next steps, the search for Miss Keene, the verification of each document, and the careful confrontation of anyone who might misuse knowledge of the house's hidden secrets. Edward followed closely, his steps measured and deliberate, while Ferncliff lingered behind, absorbing each detail with a mix of wonder and relief. I observed Holmes, as ever, entirely composed, yet his eyes shone with the intensity of a man who had once again aligned intellect, observation, and logic to unravel a human puzzle. Tomorrow, Holmes said quietly, we pursue the living witnesses, confirm the details, and bring closure to a tale that has lingered in silence for decades. Tonight, however, Watson, we may rest, for the house itself has guided us well, and the whispers, at last, have served their purpose. Edward paused in the doorway, looking back toward the concealed hatch. I will never forget this house, nor what it has taught me. My mother's voice, though hidden, has led me to the truth, and now, at last, I can begin to live with it. Holmes inclined his head. And live wisely, Edward, that is the ultimate reward of reason and patience. The house, silent once more, seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging that a chapter of secrets had concluded, but in its stillness lay the subtle promise of resolution, tempered by caution and careful attention. The past had spoken, the present had listened, and the future, guided by understanding, awaited. Holmes spent the evening in quiet reflection. Seated by the fireplace in the drawing room, his sharp gaze fixed on the flickering flames, as if the patterns of light might reveal the final threads of the mystery. Edward and Lord Ferncliff sat nearby, the younger man absorbed in the letters and the chest's contents, while the elder grappled silently with the revelation that had reshaped decades of belief and grief. I observed Holmes, noting the slight tension in his jaw and the deliberate cadence of his breathing signs that his mind was fully engaged, piecing together the next moves in the delicate orchestration of truth and human emotion. As darkness deepened, a soft knock at the front door roused us from our contemplation. Holmes rose instantly, motioning for Edward and Lord Ferncliff to remain seated. He approached the door and opened it just enough to reveal a small, weathered figure, a woman of modest stature, her face partially obscured by a bonnet, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Miss Keene, the nursemaid, had returned at last. "I was told you might be here," she said, her voice trembling yet resolute. I had to come. There are things you must know, sir." Holmes gestured for her to enter, guiding her into the drawing room. Edward stepped forward, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Miss Keene, you knew my mother. You were entrusted with my care." She nodded, her eyes misting. "From the moment she brought you into this world, she feared for you and for the family. Everything she did, every hidden word, every careful step, was to ensure you would be safe until the time was right for your discovery." Holmes observed her closely, noting the subtle signs of stress and careful calculation in her movements. "Miss Keene, we must understand the full sequence of events: your mistress's actions, the concealment of her child, and the orchestration of the letters and whispers. Be candid, and spare no detail." She drew a trembling breath and began. "Lady Ferncliff was clever beyond measure. When she fell ill in her later months, she feared that any attempt to inform her husband of your survival would be met with disbelief, or worse, danger to the child. She devised a system of hidden messages, subtle sounds, and secret passages, so that only those she trusted or someone capable of reasoning through the signs would understand. The letters were written to guide him and to test your father's judgment. The locket, the whispers, the hidden compartments, they were all part of her plan." Edward's eyes shone. "So the whispers, the floorboards, everything, they were meant for me. To guide me?" "Yes," she said softly. "And to guide your father, should he ever have the patience and discernment to follow the trail." She believed that the truth must be earned, not given blindly, and that secrecy was a shield as much as a lesson. Holmes nodded, his sharp mind piecing together her words with the evidence we had already uncovered, and the notes sent to the gardener, Judd. Miss Keene's lips pressed together briefly. They were a precaution. She could not control the movements of every servant, nor anticipate the curiosity of outsiders. The notes ensured that any disturbance would lead to discovery only if approached carefully, maintaining the integrity of the instructions she left for you. Edward Ferncliff, still pale but gradually regaining composure, asked, "And my wife, why did she leave the house?" "Because she had to," Miss Keene replied. "The final steps required distance, observation, and discretion. Her presence would have complicated matters. She ensured that everything was set in motion before she departed, confident that time and circumstance would allow the child to emerge safely." Holmes' gaze shifted to Edward. "And you, young man, are now faced with the task of piecing together the final sequence, confirming details, and reconciling your existence with the family's history. Miss Keene's testimony provides corroboration, but the documentation, the letters, the locket, the birth record must also align. Only then can the full narrative be completed." Edward nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir. I will follow each step carefully and ensure the truth is preserved and respected." Holmes continued. "One final element remains, the possibility of interference. Anyone who discovers the passages, the messages, or the chest could act to exploit or distort the truth. We must be vigilant in protecting these secrets until the proper resolution is achieved. The integrity of your mother's plan depends upon discretion, patience, and careful reasoning," Miss Keene added, her voice steadying as she regained confidence. "There are no others who know the full extent of her design. Only you, Mr. Holmes, and now Edward. All others have seen fragments, shadows, whispers, but none the whole picture." Holmes' expression softened ever so slightly, a rare glimpse of satisfaction crossing his features. "Then our path is clear. We proceed with methodical verification, confirming the letter's authenticity, tracing the passages, and ensuring that no stone remains unturned in revealing the full story. Ferncliff, still processing, said quietly, "It is overwhelming. I thought my family's past was closed, that secrets had been buried forever, and yet, here we stand, with the child returned, the truth emerging, and the house itself revealing its lessons." Holmes inclined his head. "Precisely, my lord, and it is a reminder that careful planning, foresight, and intelligence can preserve truth even in the face of time's erosion. Your wife's meticulousness has ensured that justice, understanding, and reconciliation are possible, but the process is delicate, and we must not rush. Each verification, each step in the unfolding narrative, is essential to preserve both safety and accuracy." Edward, his expression resolute, asked, "And the next step? Where do we begin?" Holmes regarded him with keen attention. "First, we interview Miss Keene in detail, recording her account of your mother's actions, the concealed passages, and any instructions she left. Second, we examine all written correspondence, verifying dates, handwriting, and intent. Third, we trace the hidden conduits beneath the house, confirming that all whispers and messages align with the plan. Only then can we approach the final revelation both to your father and to the household at large." Ferncliff's hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "It feels as if a lifetime of secrets is unfolding at once. But with your guidance, Holmes, I trust we will navigate it safely." Holmes gave a slight, approving nod. "Indeed, my lord, reason, observation, and patience will guide us. And Edward, you must understand the significance of your role, not merely as the beneficiary of secrecy, but as its steward, ensuring that the truths revealed are preserved and respected." Miss Keene added, "And I will assist in every way I can, sir. My mistress's intentions must be honored, and the child she raised safely must now emerge into the light." Holmes' eyes gleamed with focus. "Then we proceed at first light. Watson, prepare to document every detail. Edward, remain vigilant. Lord Ferncliff, observe and support with discernment. Tonight, the house rests, but tomorrow, the past and present will converge in a manner that will finally resolve the long-standing mysteries." As the night deepened, the house seemed to breathe more softly, the echoes of the whispers subdued for the first time in decades. Holmes, ever alert, already considered the next phase, verifying testimony, confirming artifacts, and tracing every concealed passage. Edward sat quietly, absorbing the significance of the revelations, while Lord Ferncliff watched both father and son with awe and tentative hope. And in that calm, deliberate pause, I realized that the story of Ferncliff House was far from complete, but the pieces, painstakingly assembled, were at last poised to reveal the full measure of truth. Guided by intellect, patience, and the careful orchestration of a brilliant mind, Holmes rose with deliberate purpose. As the first pale streaks of dawn crept through the tall windows of Ferncliff House, the house, quiet and seemingly at peace, concealed within its walls decades of intricate planning and whispered secrets. He moved toward the writing desk in the corner, his eyes scanning the scattered letters and parchments, his mind already calculating the sequence of steps that must follow. Edward and Lord Ferncliff observed him intently, each processing the enormity of the revelations in their own way, while Miss Keene stood near the doorway, her hands clasped tightly, a mixture of apprehension and resolve in her gaze. "Edward," Holmes said, his voice calm but sharp, "we must begin by verifying every piece of evidence your mother left behind. Letters, locket, and documents all require careful scrutiny. Even the minutest detail may contain subtle instructions or concealed meanings." Edward nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir. We must ensure that nothing is misinterpreted or overlooked." Holmes gestured toward the letters first. "Observe the folds, the wear, the ink. Each crease, each smudge, tells a story about the path these documents have traveled and the care with which they were handled. Watson, note these observations precisely." I leaned closer, examining the letters. Holmes picked one with deliberate care, holding it beneath the light of the lantern. The ink composition, the handwriting, the style of addressal consistent with Lady Ferncliff's known correspondences. Yet these letters differ in tone and purpose. They are instructional, not intimate. She intended them to guide, to educate, and to safeguard. Edward's eyes widened. She wrote them knowing I would one day understand, that they were a bridge to the truth. Holmes inclined his head. "Precisely, and yet, some letters contain deliberate ambiguities, to test judgment, attention to detail, and moral discernment. Note here, Edward, the phrasing "heed not the voice you cannot see, but the path it illuminates." She intended to challenge perception, to ensure only the observant could follow the trail. Miss Keene's voice trembled slightly. She was rigorous, sir. Every whisper, every hidden compartment, every instruction was calculated. My mistress feared a single mistake could endanger the child or disrupt the family entirely. Holmes' eyes glinted. "And that, Miss Keene, is why your testimony is invaluable. We must cross-reference your account with these documents, confirming dates, locations, and actions. Only then can we ensure that the entire plan was coherent and secure." Ferncliff, still pale but gradually more composed, asked, "And the passages, Holmes, the whispers beneath the floorboards, what role do they play now that Edward is here?" Holmes moved toward the cellar door, his steps precise. The passages served as both conduit and instruction. Each hollow and vent amplified sound, transmitted subtle messages, and guided the listener toward comprehension. They were never meant to frighten. They were a mechanism for controlled learning, for gradual revelation. Now, with Edward present and Miss Keene's guidance, we can fully understand their design. Edward followed closely, his gaze tracing the walls as we descended the cellar stairs once more. Holmes' hands moved over the brickwork, tapping gently, listening intently. "Notice, Watson, the subtle variations in mortar density and brick alignment. Each indicates a junction, a branching pathway. These are not random, they are deliberate markers, guiding perception, dictating movement, and ensuring the child would emerge safely and informed." Ferncliff, his hands trembling slightly, spoke. "It feels as if a lifetime of secrets is converging at once. I have lived decades in ignorance, yet now the pieces are within reach. Holmes, guide us carefully. I trust your judgment implicitly." Holmes inclined his head. "Indeed, my lord, precision, observation, and patience are our allies. We proceed meticulously, each passage inspected, each letter confirmed, each instruction verified. Only then will the culmination of Lady Ferncliff's design be fully revealed." Edward closed the chest with deliberate care. "I understand, sir. Each detail is a step, and I must follow them faithfully to preserve the intent and safety my mother ensured." Holmes' lips curved in a rare gesture of satisfaction. "Good. The past has guided us, the whispers have instructed, and the artifacts have illuminated the path. The living testimony, corroborated by documents and physical evidence, will now allow us to assemble the complete narrative. Only then can the household, and the world, understand the magnitude of Lady Ferncliff's foresight." Miss Keene, her eyes glistening, added softly, "It is time, sir. The child has returned, and the truth may finally emerge fully, as intended." Holmes nodded. "Yes, and tomorrow we begin the final phase, tracing every passage, confirming every instruction, and revealing the complete story. The house has spoken, and now, with all pieces in alignment, we may listen attentively and uncover the truth in its entirety." As the morning light strengthened, the cellar seemed less ominous. The whispers of the past softened into echoes of instruction. Edward, fully aware of his role and responsibilities, prepared to follow each step carefully. Lord Ferncliff, tempered by awe and understanding, resolved to embrace the revelations with measured composure, and Holmes, ever vigilant, already calculated the sequence of the next steps, ensuring that the story hidden beneath decades of secrecy would finally emerge, complete, coherent, and undeniable. Holmes spent the remainder of the morning organizing the sequence of verification, his movements precise and deliberate, as if conducting a symphony of evidence, testimony, and deduction. Edward observed each action with a mixture of awe and determination, while Miss Keene quietly recounted every step she had witnessed during Lady Ferncliff's careful orchestration. Lord Ferncliff lingered behind, his face pale but composed, absorbing the unfolding narrative with a combination of relief and astonishment. Holmes first turned his attention to the letters, arranging them in chronological order upon the desk. "Watson, note how each document is linked, not merely by date, but by context, tone, and purpose. Observe the subtleties in language, the deliberate variations intended to test reasoning. Edward, these letters represent a series of guided exercises in observation and deduction, each preparing you for the subsequent step." Edward examined the first letter closely. "I see now. The phrasing, the omissions, even the punctuation, these were cues. She taught me to read between the lines, to reason carefully, and to trust my own judgment." Holmes inclined his head. Precisely. Knowledge alone is insufficient. Comprehension and logical inference are essential. Lady Ferncliff understood this. Every whisper, every passage, every hidden compartment, and every letter was a carefully calibrated lesson designed to cultivate discernment and caution. Miss Keene added, her voice steady. She believed that if Edward could interpret these instructions correctly, he would emerge not merely informed, but prepared to act wisely. Understanding both the past and the responsibilities it entailed, Holmes then moved to the locket, examining its intricate engravings and interior inscriptions. Note, Watson, the precision of craftsmanship. The locket contains not only sentimental value, but encoded information, guiding the child through sequences and decisions. It is both token and tool, emblematic of Lady Ferncliff's dual purpose, preservation of memory and instruction. Edward held the locket reverently. It is remarkable. She foresaw that I would need guidance, yet designed it so subtly that only careful observation would reveal its purpose. Holmes nodded approvingly. And now we turn to the hidden passages. Their preservation is notable, and their design reveals an extraordinary understanding of acoustics and spatial perception. Watson, follow closely, and note each junction, vent, and hollow. Edward, your familiarity with these pathways will aid in confirming their intended function. We descended into the cellar once again, lanterns casting long shadows upon the stone walls. Holmes moved deliberately along the passages, tapping lightly, listening intently, and tracing the conduits that transmitted subtle sounds throughout the house. Edward followed, running his fingers along the brickwork, noting variations in alignment, mortar density, and spatial intervals that revealed the careful planning of each hidden channel. Miss Keene's voice guided us. Every hollow was placed to direct sound in specific ways, to ensure that messages, whispers, and cues reached the intended listener without danger or misinterpretation. My mistress planned for all contingencies. Holmes paused at a particularly narrow junction, tapping gently with his knuckles. Notice here, Watson, the variations in brick depth and spacing create a subtle resonance. A whisper at one end is amplified at the other, while remaining imperceptible to those outside the conduit. This is intentional, a methodical system to guide reasoning and observation. Edward's eyes gleamed with understanding. So the whispers I heard as a child, they were lessons, not tricks. Each sound, each echo, was meant to teach me to think carefully and pay attention. Exactly, Holmes replied. And now, with Miss Keene's testimony corroborating the physical evidence and the documents, the entire narrative can be reconstructed accurately. Observation, verification, and logical deduction converge to illuminate the full truth. Fern, standing silently, asked, and once we have confirmed everything, Holmes, what is to be done with this knowledge? How do we present it, and to whom? Holmes' gaze was steady and deliberate. Carefully, Edward must assume his role as steward of the knowledge, guided by understanding and discretion. The household must be informed judiciously, ensuring that the integrity of Lady Ferncliff's intentions is preserved. The past is delicate, but truth, when handled with care, brings resolution, not disruption. Edward looked toward his father. I am ready to assume responsibility. I will follow each instruction, confirm every detail, and ensure that what my mother intended is honored. Holmes observed him keenly, noting the maturity in his demeanor. Good, that resolve, Edward, is the culmination of her careful planning. Observation, reasoning, and patience have prepared you for this moment. The letters, the locket, the passages, all were designed to test and educate, culminating in your readiness to assume the truth fully. Miss Keene, her expression both proud and solemn, added, "It is as my mistress intended. The child has grown capable of understanding, interpreting, and acting wisely. Nothing more could have been hoped for." Holmes then outlined the final steps. First, we document every observation and testimony. Second, we verify the chronology, ensuring consistency between letters, objects, and passages. Third, Edward retraces the roots, confirming the function of each whisper and hollow. Finally, with corroborated evidence, we reveal the complete narrative to Lord Ferncliff and the household, restoring order, understanding, and closure. Ferncliff's hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were resolute. I understand. Holmes, lead the way. The past has guided us, and now we shall see it through with care and respect. Holmes inclined his head. Indeed, my lord, the process is meticulous, but necessary. Only through verification, observation, and careful reasoning can we ensure that Lady Ferncliffe's legacy is preserved accurately and safely. Each step reinforces the lessons she intended, culminating in clarity, wisdom, and closure. Edward carefully lifted the chest one final time, reviewing each letter, the locket, and the parchment. Holmes and I observed, noting alignment, folds, and annotations. Every element corresponded precisely with Miss Keene's testimony and the observed function of the passages. The narrative was coherent, logical, and complete, each detail confirming the meticulous planning of Lady Ferncliff. Holmes finally spoke, his voice calm and authoritative. The verification is complete. All components, artifacts, passages, letters, and testimonial line perfectly. The narrative is consistent, the intentions clear, and the outcome safeguarded. Edward, you have successfully interpreted and integrated the lessons of your mother's design. Edward exhaled, a mixture of relief, awe, and gratitude on his face. It is astonishing. Every detail, every whisper, every letter, it all leads to understanding, not merely knowledge. Holmes nodded, a rare trace of satisfaction crossing his features. Precisely, and now, with verification complete, the final revelation may be shared. The past has spoken through deliberate instruction, observation, and deduction. The present may receive it fully, and the future shall act wisely upon it. Lady Ferncliffe's orchestration is complete, her legacy preserved through intellect, reason, and careful planning. Miss Keene smiled softly, her eyes misting. It is as my mistress intended. Edward is ready, and the truth may finally emerge into the light, just as it should. Holmes surveyed the assembled group. Edward, Lord Ferncliff, and Miss Keenan allowed himself a measured, approving nod. Tomorrow, we shall trace the passages once more, confirm every subtle detail, and then present the full story to the household. For now, Watson, let us rest, for the culmination of decades of secrecy, planning, and instruction is at hand. The past has guided us well, and the final resolution approaches with clarity and certainty. As the morning sunlight strengthened, illuminating Ferncliff House with a calm, steady glow, it seemed almost as if the house itself exhaled. The echoes of whispers now softened into a harmonious rhythm of instruction completed, lessons fulfilled, and a legacy preserved for those prepared to receive it. Holmes rose early the following day, the first light of dawn painting Ferncliff House in pale gold, and immediately began organizing the verification of the passages and artifacts. Edward and Miss Keene followed closely, lanterns in hand, while Lord Ferncliff lingered behind, still absorbing the gravity of the revelations unfolding around him. Holmes' attention was unwavering. Every detail, every object, every echo of sound from the hidden passages demanded scrutiny, for only through precise verification could the full design of Lady Ferncliff be understood. Edward, Holmes said, his voice calm yet commanding, "Today we will confirm the functional integrity of each passage, cross-reference your mother's letters with the locket, and ensure the instructions she embedded into this house align with reality. Observation, reasoning, and care are paramount." Edward nodded, his expression a mixture of anticipation and responsibility. "I am ready, sir. I will follow every detail with attention and care, ensuring nothing is overlooked." Holmes led the way to the cellar, pointing to the first series of passages. "Notice the subtle gradients in the brickwork, the way the mortar absorbs or amplifies sound. Each hollow injunction has a deliberate purpose, transmitting whispers in a controlled manner. This was not merely concealment, but instruction through sound and perception." Miss Keene nodded, her hands clasped tightly. Every placement, every vent, every hollow was calculated. My mistress intended for Edward to learn not by being told, but by reasoning, observing, and understanding the pattern of her design. Holmes moved deliberately through the first corridor, tapping lightly on the bricks, listening intently, and gesturing for Edward to trace the walls. "Edward, feel the variations. Each change in depth or alignment corresponds to a message, a cue, or a guiding instruction. The passages are both teacher and protector, ensuring that only the attentive will progress safely and correctly." Edward ran his fingers along the walls, noting each imperceptible variation. "I understand now. Every whisper I heard as a child, every subtle echo, was a lesson disguised as a mystery. She intended me to observe, deduce, and reason through each step." Holmes nodded approvingly. "Exactly. And now we must verify that these passages correlate precisely with the letters and the locket." Miss Keene, recount the steps as you observed them in sequence, so we may ensure alignment between physical evidence and testimony," she began, her voice steady and deliberate. The letters were written sequentially, guiding Edward toward the concealed hatch beneath the floorboards. Each note contained subtle instructions, hints, and moral lessons. The locket contained symbols and inscriptions reinforcing these instructions. The passages beneath the house amplified messages or provided cues through acoustics, ensuring that only the observant could understand and proceed safely. Holmes paused, considering her words, and the timing of these instructions. Were they designed to arrive in a particular order, or contingent upon the child's progression through the lessons? "Sequential, but interpretive," Miss Keene replied. "Each step required reasoning. Misinterpretation could delay discovery, but the design accounted for patience and careful observation. The child had to demonstrate discernment to proceed fully." Holmes' eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "The methodology is impeccable. Observe, Watson, how Lady Ferncliffe's foresight accounts for human fallibility, ensuring that only careful reasoning leads to complete comprehension. Edward, your mother's design is a masterclass in instruction through experience." Edward's gaze drifted toward the chest once more. "Everything aligns. The letters, the locket, the passages." She thought of every detail, every precaution, every lesson. "I am beginning to see the full scope of her foresight," Holmes continued. "And now we move to verification of anomalies. Any deviations, errors, or inconsistencies must be identified and reconciled. Even minor discrepancies could distort the narrative or obscure the intended lessons. Edward, your careful observation will be essential in confirming the integrity of the system." Edward approached the chest, examining the letters and locket again. Each item was carefully scrutinized, cross-referenced with Miss Keene's account and the physical layout of the house. Holmes watched closely, noting alignment, placement, and function. "Observe, Watson," he said, "the correspondence between the letters and the pathways. The locket functions as both guide and key. The passages themselves are calibrated to reinforce lessons embedded in the documents. Precision and foresight are extraordinary," Miss Keene added. She believed that Edward would need more than knowledge. He needed reasoning, judgment, and patience. That is why the system was layered, complex, and protective. Each whisper, each hollow, each letter was part of a larger whole, designed to cultivate understanding. Holmes' gaze shifted to Lord Ferncliff. "And now, my lord, you must understand the magnitude of your late wife's planning. Decades of concealment, instruction, and observation were orchestrated to ensure that the child would emerge with comprehension, insight, and the capacity to preserve the family's legacy." Ferncliffe's hands trembled slightly, yet his eyes were resolute. "I am overwhelmed, Holmes, but I understand. Her foresight, her care, and her intelligence are extraordinary. I trust that Edward, with guidance, will honor her intentions." Holmes inclined his head. "Indeed, the final verification involves retracing the passages entirely, cross-referencing each whisper and hollow with the instructions in the letters and the symbols in the locket. Only when we are certain of perfect alignment may the full narrative be revealed to the household, ensuring comprehension, safety, and closure." Edward carefully lifted the chest one last time, reviewing the contents methodically. Every letter, every fold, every symbol matched precisely with Miss Keene's testimony and the observed function of the passages. The narrative was coherent, logical, and complete. Holmes' eyes gleamed with approval. "Edward," he said finally, "you have demonstrated remarkable insight, observation, and patience. The verification is complete. The sequence of letters, the locket, and the passages all function exactly as intended. Lady Ferncliffe's plan is intact, her instructions preserved, and the truth ready to emerge fully. Tomorrow, we shall reveal the complete story to your father and the household, ensuring understanding and resolution." Miss Keene smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "It is as my mistress intended. The child has learned, understood, and is prepared. The truth may finally be shared without danger or confusion." Ferncliff nodded solemnly. "I will embrace it carefully. The past, so long hidden, shall finally be reconciled with the present." Holmes observed them all, a rare sense of satisfaction softening his features. Patience, observation, and careful reasoning have guided us to this point. The final revelation is imminent, the lessons preserved, and the legacy protected. Lady Ferncliffe's orchestration is complete, and those prepared to receive it may now do so fully, with clarity, comprehension, and respect. as sunlight filled the corridors and illuminated the passages that had guided decades of secrecy. The house seemed to breathe in quiet triumph. Edward, fully aware of the responsibility now entrusted to him, prepared to assume his role as steward of the legacy. Lord Ferncliff, tempered by awe and understanding, readied himself to receive the truth with measured composure, and Holmes, ever vigilant, already planned the final steps, ensuring that the story concealed beneath whispers, letters, and passageways would finally emerge intact, coherent, and undeniable. Holmes began the day with a methodical review of every item and passage previously verified, his mind already arranging the sequence of final revelations. Edward followed closely, lantern in hand, while Miss Keene recounted minute details of Lady Ferncliff's instructions with unwavering precision. Lord Ferncliff lingered in the background, his face pale but determined, absorbing each explanation and observation with a careful patience born of necessity. "Edward Holmes," said, his tone deliberate and commanding, "today we shall confirm the final alignment of the passages, letters, and artifacts, ensuring that every instruction, cue, and lesson embedded by your mother corresponds precisely to reality. Observation, logical reasoning, and care are essential." Edward nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir. Every step, every detail must be confirmed. Nothing may be left to chance." Holmes gestured toward the first passage, the narrow corridor that had already revealed so much of Lady Ferncliff's design. "Notice the subtle acoustic variations, Watson. The placement of bricks, the depth of mortar, and the alignment of each hollow amplify certain sounds while suppressing others. These passages are both instructional and protective, guiding perception while preserving discretion." Edward traced them carefully, noting each alteration, each junction, each echo. Edward ran his fingers along the walls, absorbing the rhythm, the weight, the minute inconsistencies deliberately incorporated into the structure. "I see now," he murmured. "Every hollow, every subtle variation, every whisper was intended to teach me attention, reasoning, and patience. The mystery itself was a method of instruction." Miss Keene added, her voice steady yet tinged with emotion. "Every placement, every vent, every hollow was meticulously calculated. Lady Ferncliff intended for Edward to learn not merely by observation, but by active reasoning, deduction, and moral judgment." Holmes nodded. "And now, we shall cross-reference each passage with the letters and locket. Observe the inscriptions, Watson, and note the correlations between written instruction and physical guidance. Only by this meticulous comparison can we confirm the completeness of her design." Edward opened the chest, examining the letters and locket once more. Holmes watched closely, noting each fold, crease, and symbolic engraving. "Observe, Watson," he said, "how the sequence of letters corresponds precisely to the order of passages. The locket reinforces these instructions through subtle symbols, guiding interpretation and reasoning. This is an integrated system of education, protection, and revelation, executed with extraordinary foresight." Miss Keene interjected. She believed that knowledge alone was insufficient. Only through careful observation, reasoning, and interpretation could Edward reach the understanding necessary to act wisely. Each whisper, each hollow, each document was a lesson embedded in practice. Holmes turned his attention to Lord Ferncliff. "And now, my lord, you must comprehend the full magnitude of your late wife's planning. Decades of instruction, concealment, and foresight were orchestrated to ensure that Edward would emerge not only informed, but prepared to assume responsibility and preserve the family legacy." Ferncliff's hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were resolute. "I understand, Holmes. Her care, her intelligence, and her foresight are extraordinary. I trust that Edward, guided properly, will honor her intentions fully." Holmes inclined his head. "Indeed, the final verification involves traversing each passage, confirming acoustic fidelity, and ensuring that every cue aligns with the letters, the locket, and Miss Keene's account. Only then may we reveal the complete story to the household, preserving clarity, safety, and comprehension." Edward, resolute and attentive, followed Holmes through the passages, noting subtle variations, echoes, and patterns that confirmed the deliberate design of each corridor. Every whisper, every hollow, every variation in brickwork matched the instructions and letters, revealing a system of extraordinary sophistication. Miss Keene observed closely. Each step, each sound, each clue was constructed to teach observation, reasoning, and patience. The child would learn through experience, not merely instruction. It is a method of education unlike any other, integrated seamlessly into the very architecture of the house. Holmes paused at a junction, tapping lightly and listening intently. Notice, Watson, the echoes here are subtle but precise. A whisper in one section resonates fully at another, while remaining imperceptible elsewhere. This was intentional, a means of delivering guidance, ensuring that only the observant and reasoning would understand fully. Edward smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and comprehension on his face. I understand now. Each whisper, each echo, was a lesson. Every detail was designed to cultivate reasoning, attention, and judgment. She prepared me to understand the truth, not merely to receive it. Holmes nodded, eyes glinting. Precisely, and with Miss Keene's testimony, the letters, the locket, and the physical passages in complete alignment, the final verification is accomplished. Edward, you have integrated observation, deduction, and interpretation into a coherent understanding of the system. The full story may now be presented accurately, safely, and completely. Ferncliff, his voice soft but steady, said, "We are ready, Holmes. The past, so long hidden, shall finally be reconciled with the present." Edward, guided by this understanding, will honor her intentions and preserve the legacy she crafted. Holmes surveyed the assembled group, his expression one of rare satisfaction. Patience, reasoning, and careful observation have guided us to this moment. The final revelation is imminent, the lessons preserved, and the legacy protected. Lady Ferncliff's orchestration is complete, and those prepared to receive it may now do so with clarity, comprehension, and respect, as sunlight filled Ferncliff House, illuminating every corridor, passage, and hollow that had guided decades of secrecy. The echoes of whispers softened into a harmonious rhythm of instruction completed. Edward, fully aware of the responsibilities entrusted to him, prepared to assume his role as steward of the family legacy. Lord Ferncliff, tempered by awe and understanding, readied himself to receive the truth with measured composure. Holmes, ever vigilant, already anticipated the final steps, ensuring that the story concealed beneath letters, locket, and passages would emerge intact, coherent, and undeniable. And so, in the quiet grandeur of Ferncliff House, the culmination of careful planning, deliberate instruction, and extraordinary foresight stood revealed, a legacy secured, not merely through wealth or protection, but through intellect, reason, and the subtle orchestration of human understanding. The house had whispered, the child had listened, and now, the truth, fully illuminated, could finally take its rightful place in the light. Holmes gathered the household in the drawing room, the late afternoon sun casting long, golden shadows across the polished floors and ornate furnishings. Edward, holding the locket carefully in his hands, stood beside his father, while Miss Keene observed quietly from the side, her face composed but radiant with relief. Holmes, ever precise and deliberate, surveyed the assembled group, noting the subtle tensions, curiosity, and anticipation in their expressions. "My lord," Holmes began, his voice measured and deliberate, "we have completed the verification of every letter, every passage, and every artifact concealed by Lady Fer. Each component, physical, written, and testimonial, aligns perfectly, revealing a deliberate design meant not merely to conceal, but to instruct and guide." Ferncliff nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on his son. "And what, precisely, has this design revealed?" Holmes inclined his head slightly. "It reveals a lesson in observation, reasoning, and patience. Your late wife anticipated threats, uncertainties, and the fallibility of human judgment. Through letters, whispers, and concealed passages, she constructed a system to cultivate discernment, ensuring that only the observant and judicious would uncover the full truth. Edward, guided carefully by your mother's intentions, has now achieved a comprehension beyond mere knowledge. He has learned reasoning and prudence." Edward stepped forward, opening the locket. Each instruction, each symbol, each whisper was a puzzle, yet not a trap. They guided me, tested me, and taught me to see beyond the obvious. It was not simply a mystery to be solved, it was a lesson to be internalized. Holmes' eyes glimmered with satisfaction. "Precisely, and through this process, the child has become the steward of both understanding and legacy. The letters, the passages, and the locket were never merely protective, they were educational, ensuring that the mind, not merely circumstance, determined the outcome." Miss Keene's testimony confirms the meticulous foresight of Lady Ferncliff, who, even in secrecy, prioritized preparation over concealment. Miss Keene added softly, she designed every detail to teach observation, patience, and moral judgment. Edward has demonstrated the qualities she sought, and in doing so, has fulfilled the intention of her intricate design. Holmes turned to Lord Ferncliff. You now see, my lord, that your late wife's foresight and planning extend far beyond what the eye can perceive. She anticipated error, distraction, and misjudgment, crafting a system that ensures only diligence, reasoning, and care lead to true comprehension. The past was orchestrated not to deceive, but to educate and protect. Ferncliff's voice trembled with emotion. I am overwhelmed, Holmes. To think she prepared so meticulously for a child's growth, ensuring wisdom and understanding through hidden lessons. It is extraordinary. Edward, you have proven yourself worthy of this guidance. Edward bowed slightly, holding the locket reverently. I only hope to honor her intentions. Father, every step, every observation, every deduction has prepared me to understand, preserve, and act wisely. Her legacy is now entrusted to my care. Holmes' gaze swept the room, and so the mystery has been fully unraveled, not merely a riddle of hidden passages or concealed letters, but a deliberate, carefully constructed education in reason, patience, and observation. Lady Ferncliff's ingenuity ensured that truth would reveal itself only to those who approached it with care, intellect, and diligence. The deception, the hidden whispers, and the letters were never meant to mislead. They were tools to cultivate understanding and discernment. A soft silence settled over the room, the weight of decades of secrecy finally lifting. The house itself seemed to exhale. The echoes of whispers softened into the quiet resonance of lessons completed. Edward, standing resolutely, had absorbed not only the knowledge but the responsibility that came with it. Lord Ferncliff, tempered by awe and gratitude, prepared to embrace the truth with measured care. Miss Keene, proud yet composed, observed the fulfillment of the design she had witnessed so many years before. Holmes finally allowed a faint smile. The past has guided us, the evidence has instructed us, and the lessons have been learned. Edward is now prepared to navigate the responsibilities of knowledge and judgment with clarity and discernment. The legacy of Lady Ferncliff is preserved, and the household may now move forward with both understanding and confidence. Ferncliff placed a hand gently on Edward's shoulder. We owe her more than we can express. Yet now, through you, Edward, her wisdom endures. Edward, gazing at the locket, replied, I will honor her memory, Father. Every lesson, every whisper, every secret was meant to prepare me. I shall carry it forward with care, intelligence, and understanding. Holmes inclined his head, his expression reflective. And thus, the case concludes not with revelation alone, but with education, preparation, and enduring wisdom. The mystery beneath the floorboards has served its ultimate purpose, to cultivate insight, judgment, and responsibility. All has been revealed, all has been understood, and the legacy is secure. As the sun set over Ferncliff House, the golden light bathing the walls and corridors, there was a palpable sense of closure. The hidden passages, the letters, and the whispers were no longer mysteries. They were symbols of foresight, care, and intellect, and the household had emerged enlightened, guided by reason and observation. Holmes, observing quietly from a corner, allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction, knowing that the past, the present, and the future had been reconciled through deliberate instruction and meticulous planning. And in that quiet, sunlit room, the legacy of Lady Ferncliff endured not as a shadow of secrecy, but as a testament to intelligence, patience, and the enduring power of thoughtful guidance. The mystery was resolved, the lessons internalized, and the household prepared to face the future with clarity, insight, and unshakable understanding.